You know what was a huge thing for me this morning was?
What's that?
So, you know how obsessed I am with fantasy hockey?
I know you're very obsessed.
Yeah, so, you know how awful the goaltender Sam Montembeault has been for the Canadiens?
Dude, I literally was gonna text you last night, like, dude, I am so glad you made a smart move dropping Montembeault. Holy crap, Montreal, what are you doing to your poor goaltenders? But continue.
So, I still had him in the cupful. And I fell victim to that game last night.
Did you really?
Yeah. So
Oh.
I had a -6 thanks to Sam Montembeault because he got pulled. But you know what I did this morning?
What did you do?
So I saw the goaltenders that were on the free agency.
Yeah.
And there was one Connor Ingram
Oh.
in free agency. So even though it was my last ad of the week, I made the switch up, and I feel pretty good about it.
I'm glad. I'm glad because Montembeault, you just can't. Montreal's defense sucks.
And my message to Connor Ingram, welcoming him into my couple team, is, man, I don't even care if you shave your legs.
That's where you were going with that?
And welcome back, everybody, to the best music podcast on this side of the Mississippi called Hey, Listen to This. And this podcast is hosted by two dashingly good-looking men who share the same middle name. I'm the one. I am the only. I am the man who takes a long walk to get to a bit. Ryan James Kearns.
I was gonna say, where were you going with that one? I mean, I guess I don't really care if Sam Montembeault shaves his legs either, or Cartering for that matter. I am the one, the only, the often disputed and quite honestly blindsided Matthew James Turzik.
And if this is your very first time tuning into this podcast here, what me and Matt here do essentially is we discuss music. We take turns picking albums that we're going to go over track by track. It could be for a couple different reasons why we bring the album to the table. One reason is, hey, it's a classic album. And another reason is, oh, hey, it's a popular album this year. Or what's another reason, Matt?
Another reason is we just know these albums that are, near and dear to our hearts, and we want the other person to listen to them. There's a couple in that regard. The Mountain Goats, I think, is probably one on your end. The Turtles, probably more so on my end. With just stuff where it's just like, hey, I wonder what the other person thinks. And I definitely think today is going to fall into that category.
Yeah. So, what are we doing this week, man?
This week, after our conclusion of traveling through the Jack White multiverse, we are going all the way back to 1966. Now, at the end of the last episode, I gave you the options between bananas or cream cheese, and you chose cream cheese. And for the record, bananas would have been the Velvet Underground and Nico, which I would have been totally fine covering, but instead we're doing cream cheese, and we're going to be talking about a guitarist, composer, social critic, bastard, and all around just king of the underground, king of the counterculture, Mr. Frank Zappa. This man, for those who are not aware, is a guitarist from, I want to say California or New York, one of the two, but he started out in the industry sort of as this weird sort of almost like novelty type of composer, and also was a songwriter. There was an old song by the Flamingos called Memories of Almonte, which he wrote back in 1963. So he's sort of cutting his teeth on the Los Angeles scene, and it was 60s LA, and he was looking around and seeing, this clash between these sort of growing hippie types and the counter of suburbia, just thinking, well, no, this can't possibly be what America looks like. And he basically just came out with his debut album and said, screw all of you. And so in 1966, he and this band called the Mothers of Invention, who previously up to that point had been doing mostly covers of R&B tunes, they released this album called Freak Out. Now, my introduction to Frank Zappa was sort of through his one CD that my dad had, which was a greatest hits compilation called Strictly Commercial. And there you get sort of a weird collection of songs that Zappa was most famous for. Songs such as Peaches and Regalia, or Don't Eat the Yellow Snow, or a track off this album, Trouble Every Day. And you just get the sense of just how weird this guy could be, how occasionally messed up he could be. And so from there, I just sort of, would listen to other albums. And this one I didn't get to listen to about maybe several years ago. And my goodness, again, at the end of the last episode, you mentioned how you had not listened to Zappa before. I'm thinking, oh, he's in for a ride.
Yeah, and I mean, usually at this point, I would give my brief experience with the artist beforehand. That's it.
There it is. Like I say, there is none.
I knew he was always a very important music figure, very foundational for the experimental movement and rock. But I just even before, I would challenge you to come up with a Zappa song that I would know after we record this episode here, because I can guarantee you, unlike that not the Phil Collins, the Peter Gabriel. Yeah, whenever you showed me the one the one song, I don't know any Zappa songs at all.
Right.
Yeah.
And to be fair, he never really did have any major hits. He only had one top 40 hit in his entire career, which wasn't until 1982, I believe, with the song Valley Girl, which, to be perfectly honest, his daughter, Moon Unit Zappa, carried a lot of load on that one because it was a parody of these sort of Valley Girl type of talkers, like, oh my god, gag me with a spoon, and basically that for 4 minutes. And somehow it cracked the top 40. Good job, America. Other songs he was famous for that sort of had any sort of airplay at all. Don't Eat the Yellow Snow, as I mentioned, was sort of a hit for him, sort of a minor novelty hit. Dancing Fool, probably a little bit more so, around the late 70s. But aside from that, you really have to dig in order to find something that everyone's just like, oh yeah, Zappa, because there's really not a whole lot there. He is, again, very, even today, he doesn't get brought up a lot in the context of, this guy in this one song. You have to, talk to him with, there's no casual Zappa fans. Let's put it that way. I'm about as close as they come, and even I'm on the fringes of being if you're a fan of Zappa, you're not a casual fan of Zappa. You've listened to some stuff. So
would you compare it to Fish fans or a jam bandy?
Kind of. I mean, obviously the musical stylings are way different, but it is kind of in that same regard where you have the diehards, and then you pretty much have, that's it. There's not, there's not soccer moms casually listening to, Fish concerts, or, listening to some stuff that Zappa released, in the mid 80s. You're either a fan of the band or you're simply not. Because again, there's really no connection where it's I don't really listen to them, but I do like that once. No, it's one or the other, basically. And a reason for that is that a lot of his stuff is very weird. And we'll get to that in this episode.
So, yeah, I think we're ready to get at it with the opening track here, Hungry Freak's Daddy.
Hungry Freak's Daddy. And right out of the gate, we get a song that, we've talked before. I think we've talked about a few different debut albums on this show. And especially when you're going to be as weird as Zappa is and would become, if you want to establish what your worldview is right out of the gate, you need a track like this to do it. Although, to be fair, he does kind of play a smart move here by not completely ripping off, but sort of, I've heard the term used, aping the riff from I Can't Get No Satisfaction by the Stones. This riff is very similar, but not quite the same, so not a bad play on Zappa's part. And then once the vocals start, all comparisons to that song are gone because you have this sort of 2-octave droning type of almost commanding vocal, where Zappa's saying, Mr. America, walk on by, your schools that do not teach. And you're just like, oh, okay, this is different. And pretty much the whole entire song is just Zappa just starting to tear down his views of suburbia, saying, listen, the game of just putting up, big buildings and big stores and big happy communities, cities on a hill, is not going to work anymore because there are these people out here, these hungry freaks that just don't give a damn about society. They're just in it for good vibes, a good time, and they're not even sure how they're going to get there, but they're more sure than you about where you're going. Other notes of this song, the guitar solo is actually really good, probably the best guitar solo on the album, honestly. And that sort of establishes Zappa as a guitar player, which if there is one category which Zappa is well known, it's throughout guitar nerds. He's considered one of the greatest guitar players of all time, and he's up there. He's definitely up there. But I don't necessarily think that that's what he was going for. That was sort of his fallback. His stuff more was the experimental side of rock. But yeah, right out of the gate, we have a very menacing, very perplexing song that sort of sets the anti-establishment tone of not just this album, but for the rest of Zappa's career. And because of that, because of its importance to the Zappa auteur, I am putting this in my top 3 at number 3. Although I will say it was very hard to knock some out of my top 3. This is probably the hardest top 3 I've ever had to assemble for this show. And for the record, all I have is a top 3.
So I have a top 3, and I have a bottom 1.
A bottom, ooh, okay, all right.
I'm going to start just right out of the gate and just say this song here is my bottom song. But it's not a bad song.
Okay.
And the only reason what keeps it, into that, not a bad song category and, kicking it up, one notch and, disqualifying it from, the quasi-rules I have for, my bottom songs in the show is the fact that the dual vocals, they don't work for me, man.
Okay.
Yeah.
I can understand that.
Yeah. Otherwise, this is a fun song. A lot of the points that you made about the anti-establishment lyrics are really, really good. The section that I highlighted was exactly what you brought to the table. Your schools that don't teach, Mr. America, walk on by the minds that won't be reached. So kudos to you. I did enjoy the guitar solo, and you mentioned the Can't Get No Satisfaction, kind of rip off there. And I absolutely that's something I picked up on right away. You know how I usually have researched prepared for episodes in the past by using genius.com, right?
Yeah.
They said that the guitar riff for this song here inspired or gave way to the guitar riff for Sweet Leaf by Black Sabbath. And it's been a while since I've listened to that song specifically, but in my head, I hear this and I hear Can't Get No Satisfaction instantly.
Yeah, no, I kind of get where they're going with that because I think the notes are similar.
Okay.
If you put sheet music of both Sweet Leaf and Hungry Freaks Daddy next to each other, it would probably be the same notes, but it's not the same rhythm, which is kind of why I think it's a little bit more of a stretch and a little closer to Satisfaction, like you're saying.
Yeah.
Another note about, because I completely get where you're coming from with this vocals coming out of the gate being like they are, not necessarily hitting the right tone.
Yeah.
One, I think that's kind of, and I'm going to be saying this a lot in the episode, so warning now, I feel like anytime Zappa does something that sounds unpleasant, it's on purpose. So I feel like him doing that sort of double octave thing at the start, was probably a way of saying, okay, this isn't going to be your regular rock record. We're not going to do that. But that being said, at the end of the day, people like what they like, and if you don't like that, I completely understand. Although I will say the second verse doesn't do that. And so I'll ask you this before we move on. If Zappa had sung the first verse like he would have this, like he did the second, would that have bumped the track up a little bit?
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely. And it was more of an aesthetic thing for me. So.
I get that.
And like there are plenty enough moments throughout the rest of the record where stuff gets a little bit weird, and if it's not your cup of tea, then you can understand maybe stay away.
Right.
One other thing I want to highlight about Hungry Freaks Daddy is the one bit of instrumentation that sounds like a duck call.
Oh yeah.
I love that, man. That comes up several other throughout the rest of the album, but oh my goodness, I love that.
I was wondering about that because we've talked in the past. I want to say it was on the one that immediately comes to mind is the Public Enemy episode.
Yeah.
The sort of weird squeals that sort of took that album down a little bit for you. I was wondering if you were going to have that same reaction here, and I'm kind of glad to hear that it's not that.
Yeah, no, it did land in my good graces, and yeah. Other than that, the other moment that I want to highlight here, I like when the instrumentation cuts back on in the moments in the lyrics where he's they're talking about what's on their minds, the left behinds of the Great Society, that it's a purposeful moment, and somebody like Frank Zappa did that for a reason. As redundant as that sounds, but I always appreciate when songwriters do that because it really just draws the listener into an important moment, and I'm instantly rewarded by that.
Yeah, no, I agree, and it's again this showcases that even though Zappa is trying to sort of distort the perception of a common rock album or a common music album, that there's still enough in there that he's playing it smart, combining the two instead of just, going full on create noise for no reason at all, which towards the end of the album sort of steers in that direction, but we'll talk about that.
So the next track is I Ain't Got No Heart. So, yeah, this is the funniest shit song for me. So, not even getting into the lyrics at least right away because me, I'm always drawn into that kind of stuff. I dug the vocals in this track here. They almost kind of we're recording this literally one day before Halloween. Mm-hmm. They almost have this spooky kind of atmosphere to it, and I do appreciate that. And just the where at the very end, this is almost a straightforward kind of track. Kind of Beatles-esque in 60s and 70s rock. Yeah. But then the moment where it just it goes free form at the end for a second, then it just goes back in. It's almost just oh hey, I let me unleash my chaotic side. Hi, I'm Paul.
Exactly. Exactly.
And oh my goodness, the lyrics, the only thing I want to highlight here, is the fact this section, it's very, I know we just got done with the Jack White universe, but these lyrics here, they are very this is a big old middle finger to a lover that is trying to court Frank Zappa in this circumstance. You get lyrics girl, I don't believe in what you say. You say your heart is only mine. I say to you, you must be blind. What makes you think you're so fine that I would throw away the groovy life I lead? 'Cause baby, what you got, yeah, it sure ain't what I need.
That is such... So this, a lot of times, especially on the more straightforward pop songs, which I agree this is in that category, there's sort of two, maybe three-ish categories of song on this record, which are the sort of avant-garde rock, the just pure avant-garde, and then the straightforward pop. This falls in the straightforward pop. That lyrics on those tracks, the straightforward pop tracks, are so uniquely and, again, revolutionarily depressing. Like, before this album, like, I can't really think of any other albums or songs that really were this nasty. Maybe stuff off of Bob Dylan's Highway 61 Revisited. Maybe some stuff off of the Beatles' Help, like Yesterday in the title track. But again, nothing quite as biting as this. Again, and I appreciate the Jack White comparison because this is definitely some stuff that he would probably write later on down the line to sort of be like, you think you'll love me? Oh, no, honey, aside from that, though, I completely agree on the vocals. They are fantastic. Ray Collins, who is the other main vocalist on this record, does a wonderful job harmonizing with Zappa, and the orchestration's great, and that ending is perfect. Because you're thinking, like, okay, they're just going to say, I ain't got no heart anymore, but as soon as they're expecting them to say more, bam, weird freak out moment, and you're just like, what in the hell was that? And it, not having listened to this song for the first time in a long time, I was just knocked out. But I was like, oh, so this is where they went with this. Okay, all right, that's cool. And again, it's so brief. It's like 5 seconds, and then they just end the song. It's just like, okay, what you thought was going to happen didn't happen.
Yeah, it like I love when stuff like that happens. Like it's almost like Frank like winking at the audience, being like, "This is gonna come. This is what's gonna come." And later on in the album, if you stay with me. Mm-hmm. So, you ready to move on to the next track?
Yes. I mean, for the record, neither of us have this in our top 3, do we?
No.
Okay, good. The next track is "Who Are the Brain Police?" And this track is another twist. Because you thought the end of I Ain't Got No Heart was a twist, this track. Starting with the opening where it's just that weird, like, bottom drone bass type of thing. Where it's just like, brr, brr. It's just like this weird, almost machine-like type of intro. And then you have the sort of offbeat clapping and chanting. And this was a hard one to kick out of the top 3 because it was, again, this track is just so out of left field. And the lyrics, too, once again, going back to Frank's worldview of plastic and chrome and all these shiny, proper, established things that, you know, what are you going to do when it all runs out? What are you going to do when things start melting? What are you going to do when you start melting? And basically saying that, hey, all of this is fake and you're not safe from it. As far as the actual question, who are the brain police? I think I read something where he was talking about how the way that he was thinking, it's just like, who's putting these intrusive thoughts in my brain? And he sort of developed the song based off of that. So that's kind of why the lyrics don't super cohere as some of the others on this album. But the way that this song goes, it has that second freak out of, I believe, 3 on this record, which sounds the same. It's the longest one of the 3, and it's sort of just the middle of the song where you're just like, oh, we're going a little deeper this time. And it's not my top 3, but man, it's a really good song. Especially the ending where you do sort of have this sort of another like duck call moment, which I kind of wish they hadn't had in this song, which I thought was, you know, I get it, but I didn't necessarily need it. But the way that the accelerando happens with that drone from the opening is such a nice touch. I really dig this song a lot.
I do too, man. It's not in my top 3 either, but like a lot of the thoughts and feelings that you have about the track, I share with you. Like, I did appreciate the big, massive opening and then the pivot into like the trippy section. The interlude, though, like you mentioned, that is crazy as hell. With the scream and like the repetition of the phrase, "I think I'm gonna die," like so many times.
Right.
And it's like, if you, ladies and gentlemen, if you enjoy substances while like listening to music, don't enjoy substances while listening to this song here, because you might think you're gonna die, and it's probably not gonna be a good time.
Probably not.
But yeah, I just one other thing I want to highlight about the track here that you didn't particularly cover is that I love the contrast between the how the refrain of "Who are the brain police?" I sung that much better than the actual track comes along. You like, and then the verses, like, they're more structured and traditional like verses, but then you get like that kind of dissonant chorus there, if you want to call it that. I thought that was a nice touch. Lyrically, for me, there's not much here other than like what you covered.
Yeah.
I just do appreciate the hell out of this track, and it's very much a good time for me. Maybe if it was expanded upon maybe a little bit more, maybe it could have like popped into my top 3, but my top 3 here, they're there for a specific reason. And once I get to it, obviously the point of the show is we will talk about it.
Right.
Yeah. So, going on to the next track here. Go Cry on Someone Else's Shoulder. Another hilarious track for me. And lyrics aside, one moment that I really did appreciate, it's a very doo-woppy kind of song, and it's just the way that the bass vocals land, I just found so hilarious. It was just he was really leaning into the cheese factor. I really did appreciate that. The vocal delivery on it is just so good, and especially I was listening to this on the way home from work today, and I noted the fact that the opening section before the rest of the track kicks off, where he's just doing that little brief introduction, it sounds like he's a character from VeggieTales.
He kind of does. Not gonna lie, he kind of does.
And oh my god! But just the whole premise of the song, it's basically another, metaphorical, middle finger to, a former lover, being oh, hey, this girl wants Frank back, but, Frank is just just go cry on someone else's shoulder. And, my favorite line in the whole song that just really stood out to me is, "That's why I had to get my khakis pressed."
I had it written down too. Because once you hear them say that, you realize that they're not taking this shit seriously.
Yeah.
And again, it's such a great... so again, this being doo-wop, this is right in Frank Zappa's wheelhouse. This is the stuff he wrote when he started, and really sort of his bread and butter as far as basic songwriting. I've read interviews where he's talked about how doo-wop is the greatest kind of music that's been ever written. So this is just him doing what he loves to do best, but also presenting it in a way that is so brilliantly satirical. It's not just a basic you broke my heart and now I must say goodbye to you. No, he's gonna be I got this pompadour finish on my hair, I got a new pair of shoes, that's why I had to get my khakis pressed. And it's just who says that in a song? Who actually makes that part of a song? And they went there and did it. But again, I think it's his biting lyricism mixed with his great songwriting. And once again, Ray Collins on the vocals, working with him, doing this great doo-wop vocal. Again, not in my top 3 either, but man, again, so far we are 4 songs in, and I know we disagree on Hungry Freak's Daddy, but in my mind there hasn't been a bad song yet.
So I'm gonna put a punctuation mark on "Go Cry on Someone Else's Shoulder" by saying that this song did land in my top 3.
Oh,
at number 2.
Number 2.
Yeah.
Wow.
And it's just for the fact of the messaging, the lyrics, the performance, and just the hilarious aspects of it. This is an instant standout track for me.
I completely respect that. That is a hell of a choice, though. I don't think this would land in my top 5, but it definitely goes into the As It Returns, the good song bucket. So the 5th track on Freak Out is Motherly Love. And this track goes more into a rock style that we heard on Hungry Freaks Daddy. A bit more straightforward, though, and a little bit more sexist this time because this track is pretty much just a pun on the band's name of Motherly Love. Because Motherly Love is supposed to be, comforting and wholesome, and this track is not that. Basically, it's a song about how the band is going to prescribe their own brand of motherly love by completely doing things that are depraved, and I won't mention here as far as the lyrics. The lyrics aren't that depraved, but they're still pretty sexist. And granted, rock has a long tradition of sexist drivel in its material, and unfortunately, Zappa would sort of lean into this a little harder as his career went along. But I like this song a lot just because that melody on the chorus is so damn well executed. It's so powerful when they sing motherly love. And it's just like, they mean what they're saying. It may not be good, but they mean it. So yeah, this definitely not in my top 3, but also much higher than you would probably expect. Like, I could probably put this in the top 10 and not feel bad about it.
You want to know how stupid I am?
How stupid are you?
So, like, it took me to my last listen of the album to be like, oh, the band is called the Mothers of Invention, and this song is called Motherly Love.
Yeah.
And they're talking about groupies and giving it to the groupies. Mm-hmm. Oh. So that's how stupid I am. But a lot of my, I share, like, the majority of thoughts and feelings on this track as you did. Yeah, like, this song did, like, remind me of the same thoughts and vibe, like, not thoughts and vibes, but, like, the same kind of Beatles kind of vibes, like, 60s, 70s, like, trippy kind of music. Mm-hmm. I really did dig the feel of it, and, like, just for me, the main thing was just the lyrics and, like, how funny they were, especially the set of lyrics where it's just, like, don't ever think we're shy, send us some little groupies, and we'll take their hands and rock them till they sweat and cry, and I'm like, oh.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Outside of that, pretty much like a album track for me, but vibes are there, the lyrics are there. It's a good time for me.
I'm right there with you. It's, again, it almost feels like a TV theme song for the Mothers if the TV was cable access and nobody was paying attention. So, yeah, no, this song is pretty good, but not in my top 3. So moving on to the next track, which is How Could I Be Such a Fool?
So this track for me, it's another decent song, very much like another kind of album track for me. I dug the soul elements. The lyrics basically tell the story of another heartbreak. For me, there wasn't any stand-outish moments in terms of there being some sort of satire. And I mean, overall, it's a good time for me. It blends that 60s and 70s styles music to to a T. Chorus was decent, but again, very much like an album track for me. Not really any standout moments, to be honest with you, man.
Yeah, I kind of get that, but at the same time, I usually never do this. In fact, I don't think I've ever done this. But throughout my notes, I put numbers by each track, signifying where I have it in my top 3 or if I don't like it. I have by this track number 4. Because this was probably the hardest cut I had to make out of my top 3. This song, I think, is fantastic. Now, I agree that I think the reason I don't have it in my top 3 because it doesn't have sort of that satirical bite or revolutionary nature of some of the other tracks that we have yet to discuss and have discussed already. It's very straightforward as far as its tone and sort of continues on with that same level of sort of depressing, you ruined my life type of vibes that we heard on I Ain't Got No Heart or Go Cry on Someone Else's Shoulder. But the way this track builds, sort of that very sort of spare opening with just the drums and the guitars and the piano, I thought was a great touch. And the way it just sort of builds from that into the last section where, again, Ray Collins and Frank Zappa's vocals are just soaring at the end. I think the orchestration on this track is fantastic. And yeah, like it really came super close to being in my top three, edged out by again the more tone-setting Hungry Freaks Daddy and two others that we have yet to discuss.
I can't wait for us to dive into further of our top three.
I have a sinking suspicion we might have the same number one, but we'll get there.
Okay. So ready to move on to Wowie Zowie.
Wowie Zowie. Now, this track is the first track on the album that kind of felt more like an album track to me. There are really good moments on it, like the vibraphone that's just shredding throughout the track, which usually are two words that don't go together, but it's, just the case here, where it's the vibraphone that's just like shredding. You just hear.
Yeah.
Aside from that, though, again, Zappa knows his source material both musically and lyrically. Where he's talking about, Wowie Zowie, baby, you're so neat, and he's throwing in these lines like, I don't care if you shave your legs. Like, he's proven that he's taking the music seriously, but not necessarily the lyrics or the people that the lyrics are about seriously. The way that it ends with the reference to Sherry by the Four Seasons, I thought was a nice touch. But otherwise, I really don't have a lot to say about this track. It's fine.
I hope by the end of tonight I'm saying Wowie Zowie to Connor Ingram. Bringing back that intro again. I think I'm actually a little bit higher on this track than you.
You probably are.
Yeah, it's not in my top three. But, for me, this song is mainly riding on the same kind of vibes as, a lot of the other tracks on the album that we've heard so far. Because the album does get more interesting.
It gets weird.
Yeah, it gets pretty freaky. One could say it freaks out. But this song here, has hilarious lines. I love how each verse ends in, I don't even care. We talk about shaving your legs. The other line is, I don't even care if you brush your teeth. And yeah, that's essentially it. Those two lines there. Whenever those hit my ear holes, I was kind of laughing a good bit. And on first glance, somebody could probably get annoyed by the amount of times the title of the track is said.
Yeah.
For me, it was fine. I did dig it. The chorus was fun, where they're bomb diddy bomb diddy bomb. Kid Rock saw that. Which is oh wait, hold my beer.
It's watch this.
Wowie Zowie here, man.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a pretty it's a standout-ish track for me. Just because of again, the funny lyrics, the overall vibe, and I did dig the Wowie Zowie in the bridge.
Yeah, no, the Wowie Zowie, the bridge. I mean, again, this is a good song. It's not a great song by any means, but yeah, it's just it's full of stuff where it's just oh, okay, didn't expect that, cool. But yeah, I'm ready to move on to You Didn't Try to Call Me.
So, the main thing that I took away from this song is I love the ability that Frank had to capture the anxiety of somebody who is expecting a phone call from a lover, and being he starts it out as this casual oh hey, yeah, you didn't try to call, and then by the end you can really feel it's a full on panic attack. I did dig that. It does embrace those doo-wop elements that we did find earlier in the album, the one moment in the bridge I did appreciate a good bit, where it almost seems like you're ramping up the anxiety to 11 with lyrics I can't say what's wrong or right, but I love you. All you've gotta is call me babe, because I love you. You make me feel so excited, girl. I got so hung up in you from the moment that we met. No matter how hard I try, I can't keep the tears from running down my face all alone at my place. The way that that's delivered, it's very frantic, and I did dig it a good bit. And the outro is a spoken word fun time for me. And just overall, I just love, again, you get Frank embracing the doo-wop elements, and I'm glad that you brought to the table, he did appreciate that styling of music, and it's a little bit of a refreshing take on it, especially with a track like this. Track did not land in my top 3, but I did appreciate it nonetheless, man.
It didn't land in my top 3 either, but I appreciate it a whole lot too. And you talk about the anxiety that is presented. I think a big part of that is the song's shining quality, which to me feels like, and Frank's done this a few times throughout this album already, particularly on Motherly Love and I Ain't Got No Heart, where it feels like he's taken this traditional structure of a pop song and just like putting them in a blender and pouring out whatever came out of the blender. Like, it feels like there's so many different parts of the pop song in this song, but it's not a traditionally structured pop song. Because, again, the chords go all over the place. Where it stops, like you say, on the bridge where you get the horns before Ray Collins goes, but I love you. Again, like, it defies traditional structure without sounding non-traditional. And I think that's a brilliant move on this track. And what makes it even more fascinating is the fact that you talk about that spoken word outro being sort of silly. Yeah. The fact of the matter is, it's not that silly, honestly. Yeah. Like, it feels like it could be something that a guy complains about, or very matter-of-factual, like all the like weird, bizarre details of, you know, what they're doing at the time. You know, it's like, I'm trying to watch television, you didn't try to call me. You know, like, again, who puts that in a song? And then Frank was like, I will. So yeah, not in my top 3, but damn, it's good.
Before we move on to Anyway the Wind Blows, ladies and gentlemen, if you are listening to us right now and you're thinking, wowie zowie, man, I really like what these guys are doing, I want to help support them. Matt, what is the best way that the listeners that are wowie zowing right now are doing? How can they support us in the best way?
Well, don't go to any great big Western hardware store. Make sure you go to YouTube to watch our videos, or go to your favorite podcast platform of choice, whether it be Spotify or Apple Music or any other big ones. You can follow us on social media by going to Facebook. We're Hey Listen to This on Facebook, TT Hey Listen on Twitter, and I will not call it the other thing. We are on Threads, not on Blue Sky or Truth Social. And if you have an idea for a future episode, or perhaps any feedback you'd like to give us directly, you can email us at ttheylisten@gmail.com. Again, that is ttheylisten@gmail.com. We appreciate any and all feedback. Tell us what we can do better on. Tell us what you like, what you don't like. And again, we may do one of your future episodes if you suggest one to us.
So, the next track is Anyway the Wind Blows.
Anyway the Wind Blows. And I will say, I like this song as it is, but if I were to like, this song's too good for me to say it's my least favorite, but I will say that it probably is that, because it's just a little on the forgettable side. It feels more like a sonic continuation of You Didn't Try to Call Me. The vocals are very nice. It's performed very well. But honestly, I really don't have a whole lot to say about that. It's honestly too straightforward a pop song to even exist on this record. And granted, I think maybe it's just, I know what's coming and it's just blows whatever this is out of the water. But it's a fine pop song.
So I'm kind of right there with you. Again, I feel like I'm just a hair higher on this track than you are. And like, there's only like 2 things that I'm gonna bring to the table to just add a little bit more context to the song. One thing I did appreciate about this song is just the little lick that occurs between the sections. Like, it's a nice, like, you know, through line. I always appreciate like instrumental choices like that. And the lyrics, though, there's a funny moment in the lyrics, like, because, you know, you get the majority of the song is just like, yeah, you know, hey, you know, this is another, like, love is just a great thing. I you know, it's a easy breezy kind of song, like, you know, anyway the wind blows, I'm here for her. And then you get lyrics like, I'm gonna stick it with her till the day I die. She's not like you, babe. She would never, ever lie.
Right.
So this is another, like, you know, metaphorical middle finger to, like, an ex-girlfriend. / whoever, like, if all these girls are, if all these songs were connected to one girl,
It's like a bad time.
But yeah, overall though, decent song for me. Has some pretty cool moments, and yeah, maybe I can bump it up a little higher from my ranking of like putting it apart from very much like the album track. But the thing that kind of holds it down from popping up to that next tier is the bridge section's pretty run of the mill. It doesn't do anything to add to the track.
Right.
So moving on.
Yeah. The one more final thing about this track, and that sort of peers into the next track, is the fact that this song is just, again, incredibly straightforward and upbeat. And the fact that it comes right before the next track, I think, is, again, a sign of Zappa's genius. The fact that such a, lighthearted song, any way the wind blows doesn't matter to me, our love is going to be fine. And then it's followed up by I'm Not Satisfied. And Ryan, you can go first.
So this is one of the, I know I said that I did appreciate Go Cry on Somebody Else's Shoulder. This song could have popped into my top 3 because it's simply a hilarious song. And maybe hilarious, might not be the right word for it.
Right.
But for me, when I heard it for the first time, and I heard lyrics maybe I'll just kill myself. I'm like, oh, okay. Right. But overall, the song is incredibly funny and has some great songwriting moments. Wise that take it to the next level, especially with that intro where you get the first introduction of, yeah. It's a fun way to start off any track. I need that to be my alarm clock in the morning.
Right.
My wife might kill me for that. And for me, I love how the after the hits us in the face to kick off the track, and the horn. After that, you get the horn hit to kick off the verses. That's a good moment as well. The chorus is fantastic with how the vocals match up with the instrumentation. I'm always a fan of that. And the lyrics, like I mentioned, are incredibly depressive and kind of funny at the same time. The whole set of lyrics I want to highlight are why should I pretend I like to roam from door to door? Maybe I'll just kill myself. I just don't care no more. Again, I shouldn't laugh at this, but for me, it's kind of funny.
I understand your perspective on it. Here's my thing. To me, the only sort of thing that's making it funny or seemingly comedic is that yeah, because that's just sort of a traditional piece of rock or pop where it's just yeah, saying we're gonna have a good time, and then they describe the very much worst time you could possibly have. That being said, I read this a bit more straightforward than you did. It felt like the rest of the song was very much a straightforward description of depression. Yeah. And very well executed. Like you said, the vocals are fantastic. The orchestration is beautiful on this track. The way everything's being sung is great. And the lyrics, again, it is shocking to hear lyrics like this in a song that's as musically upbeat as it is. Especially whenever you mention those lyrics about, Zappa saying, maybe I'll just kill myself, and just the background vocals that sort of carry it. This track, I talked about this last week with On and On and On from Blunderbuss, and what tracks am I going to go to whenever I think about this album. This is one of them. I have it at number 2 in my top 3.
So we don't share the same. Well, we mostly don't share the same top 3. So we might agree on that one song.
Yeah, I think we might agree on that one song, but your top 3 is a little different than mine so far.
Yeah, at least there's
because I'm just trying to think. We've only gotten to one of the top 3, correct?
For myself and you before this track here too.
Well, no, because I had Hungry Freaks Daddy in my top 3 as well. So this is the second in my top 3. So the only thing missing left is that number 1.
Yeah, that's what I said before this track. We will only touch on one of ours.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, maybe on the next spin of it, maybe I should view it from the lens or listen to it from like the filter that you are throwing down. Maybe it's just because of like how just silly like parts of the album have been so far for me. Like,
True.
I took it in that way, but yeah. Ready to move on to You're Probably Wondering Why I'm Here?
You're probably wondering why I'm here, and so am I. So am I. This track to me felt like almost a sequel to Hungry Freaks Daddy. Like, very much a take on the protagonist of the song, the lead singer, saying, you probably don't understand why I feel the way I do, and that's how I feel about you too. And just, again, like, little lines, like, talking about how, drink your fizz, say gee whiz, or, you think you're neat, I think your life is incomplete. Like, this is Zappa songwriting 101. Basically, you think your life is great, I think it's bullshit. So, I really like this song a lot. It did not crack my top 3, but it does have a lot of great elements, not just, again, the themes that sort of parallel Hungry Freaks Daddy. I think it also defies traditional pop sequencing, like You Didn't Try to Call Me, where the traditional, like, how many lines do you go through before you get to the chorus or before you get to a bridge are all over the place. Like, you don't expect the song to sequence the way it is if you're thinking it's going to be a traditional pop song. Again, the weird kazoo noises, or the duck calls, if you will, a little on the unnecessary side, but at the same time, it is necessary because it's Frank Zappa and he doesn't give a damn what you think. So that's pretty much what my thoughts on this song. I like it. It goes in the good song bucket, but not in my top 3.
So, I love this song, man.
Oh boy, here we go.
It's in my top 3 at number 3.
Okay.
So it's not my favorite song, but like it popped up there, and mainly just for the fact of just how hilarious that chorus is. Like, the first time I heard it, it instantly stuck in my head. I instantly remembered it, and like, the chorus is, "You're probably wondering why I am here. So am I. So am I." Like, that's absolutely just funny as shit, man.
Mm-hmm.
And another thing that, like, you talk about the duck noise kazoo thing that pops up again in this track here. Like, I thought that was fantastic. The random inclusions of "yeah" again are fantastic. Maybe, like, maybe Little John is a fan of Frank Zappa. Maybe that's why he got his catchphrase.
Yeah.
And the lyrics are great too. I'm not gonna steal much of your thunder there. You cover that pretty much on the tee. But yeah, this song rules, man. Like, I absolutely love it. It's a highlight off the album for me. So it's at number 3.
I respect that. Again, this is a song I would probably put in my top 10 on this album, just for being as abrasive and in your face as it is. Like, this seems like, honestly, it could be argued that this song does Hungry Freaks Daddy better than that did. But I feel like the riff on Hungry Freaks Daddy was a little bit more of a selling point for, establishing Zappa's worldview. I think this is just sort of a repetition of it, but that's just sort of nitpicking. I like the song a lot.
I'm right there with you with, like, the riff and the instrumentation on Hungry Freaks Daddy. That's a little bit better, but just the overall package of You're Probably Wondering Why I'm Here, sold me a little bit better.
And the vocals didn't turn you off as much.
No, not at all. It's very much like, thumbs up. Yeah. I was like, hold on, phrasing. So, speaking about phrasing, moving on to the next track here. Trouble Coming Every Day.
Yeah.
Fantastic song, in my opinion. So, for me, this is one of the most straightforward anti-establishment, songs that Frank has on this album, and it's essentially just a blues rant. Like, he has, like, the backdrop contains excellent instrumentation. You get that blues guitar, that guitar solo in here is great. The harmonica inclusion is great. Just the overall vibe of everything backing Zappa in this song, like it really adds to the context of what Frank's talking about, which is basically like, what was going on after the Watts riot, which I do believe that's what the song is basically about.
Yes.
And like, I hate to say it, like, a lot of the thoughts and messages, like a lot of the stuff that Frank's talking about in that track and this track here, like I can kind of like get behind in a modern day sense. Like, this could be another inclusion of like fantasy hockey that I'm gonna mention here, is that if it wasn't for like hockey and that stuff occupying my brain as much as it is right now, like if I were to turn to like what's going on in the modern day, oh man.
Yeah, we for those wondering, we are recording this 6 days away from Election Day 2024, so it's been a ride.
Yeah. But yeah, again, this song is absolutely an absolute gem of the track on the album for me, and you can probably guess that we have arrived at my favorite song on the album.
I called it.
You knew it.
I knew it. I knew it. And not only that, I called the fact that both of us have it at number one, because I do as well.
Hell yeah, boy! Yeah!
And really for a lot of the same reasons that you described. Again, I have in my notes, it's amazing how these lyrics have gained interest in their relevance. Like, because a lot of the stuff like he's talking about on this song, TV news stations being the first on the scene with like the most disgusting, depraved acts of our own humanity that you could ever imagine, and putting that out there like it's a good thing. And for if you happen to be like a news journalist who is working on the scene, I don't discredit you. You're just doing your job and you're doing what you're supposed to do. Blame the company you work for sort of going with the status quo, but that's another discussion for another time. I've been there. I know the whole scene. Trust me. But even for 1966, again, even though like a lot of these themes that were discussed here are very relevant of the time and are much more relevant now, nobody was singing about this. Could you imagine the Beatles singing a song like this? Could you imagine the Stones singing a song like this? The only person I can imagine singing anything close to this is Dylan. I don't even think he would be as abrasive to include a line such as, "Hey, people, I'm not black, but there's a whole lot of times I wish I could say I'm not white." Like, this is Zappa saying this in 1966. If someone said that now, it would start a controversy. So for him to be saying this again on his first record in the 60s, it is mind-blowing. And that's, again, not taken away from the music, which is really good. That harmonica is fantastic. The guitar is fantastic. The outro, which speeds up with the accelerando again, fantastic. Like, this is a song, like, I'm pretty sure, like, any, like, quote-unquote casual Zappa fan would probably be like, this is my favorite song off this album, which is, a little on the cliche side, but I don't give a damn. Like, this is just a great song, period. Like, it doesn't matter who's singing it, but in this case, it is Frank Zappa, and he nails it. Like, he nails the perspective of someone who's just tired of watching the same mess on TV, doesn't believe in any of it, doesn't think that the establishment is right to tell us what to do. And again, it feels very relevant in 2024, some almost 60 years later. So yeah, easy number one for me on this one.
Man, like, you just took my appreciation for the song and took it up another level, man.
I appreciate that, man, because it's such a revolutionary track in that regard, just for being what it is. So the next track is Help, I'm a Rock. And now we enter the really weird part of this album. Because if you thought stuff like Hungry Freak's Daddy or Who Are the Brave Police were out of whack, you ain't heard shit yet. Because now we get into what Zappa would be calling, I don't even know, like, this is like, if you talk about like avant-garde experimental stuff, like, this is like pinpoint stuff.
Yeah.
Because really the key to this track to me in keeping it, like, I want to say listenable, because it could be listenable to like without what it needs. But Jimmy Carl Black, who's the drummer throughout this, I think the majority of this album, and especially on this track, his drumming is essential to this track being as listenable as it is. Because he's doing this very basic, like, 3/4 beat, and he's, like, not moving. He is, like, locked in with that beat, and thank God he is, because basically Zappa is taking license to do whatever the hell he wants on this track, and he does exactly that. It starts with this, like, weird riff of, sort of like a fast strumming guitar atop this beat, and all of a sudden you start hearing these chants. Just these, like, almost, like, speaking in tongues level, like, drivel. With, like, other interjections mixed in. And then about, like, 2.5 minutes into this track, you hear the third of the freakouts, which you had already heard on Who Are the Brain Police and I Ain't Got No Heart, before it goes into the chorus question mark of Help, I'm a Rock, Help, I'm a Rock, Help, I'm a Rock, before sort of dwindling back into just chaos territory. And then it ends with this weird sound collage where you hear, like, guys yelling, guys panting, women gasping in some form, whether it be in fear or perhaps orgasm, whatever the case may be. And that, oddly enough, is a preview of things to come for a track down the line. But yeah, this to me, what this track represents and what the final section of this album represents is sort of an oral version of the impending doom that sort of lies beneath suburbia that Frank is attacking. Like, I'm going to describe your nightmares, and then I'm going to play them back for you. And this feels like the first part of that. Again, none of these tracks land in my bottom anything just for being as revolutionary as they are. But yeah, it's getting weird.
And I'm absolutely here for it.
I figured you would be.
All the time. Like for me, you mentioned like the descriptive of it being unlistenable. Like, if anybody's listening to this and thinks it's unlistenable, like, I challenge you to listen to, like, Bitches Brew by Miles Davis, or like any of the freeform jazz stuff that John Coltrane has done, or listen, even if you want to be like, Ryan, I want to listen to something more modern day. 2 words: Melt Banana.
Okay, all right.
But yeah, essentially, like, it's gonna be very hard for me to talk about, like, these tracks here, because there's just no defined form, not really any, like, specific, like, outside of the few sections that I can highlight.
Right.
But half the song is basically gibberish, and it kind of reminded me of like, for those of you out there who are like SpongeBob SquarePants fans, it's almost like if Doodle Bob took over and like decided to write a track. Yeah.
Nickelodeon, if you are listening, please make that a thing.
Oh my god.
You already gave us the yellow album. Give us the gray album with Doodle Bob.
Oh, I need that. And the other thing I'm going to mention about in Help I'm a Rock, I love the flip on Help I'm a Rock to Frank talk about, like, hey, I want to be a cop. Help I'm a cop. Help I'm a cop.
I appreciate that too.
And then another thing that I did appreciate in this track here, it was another moment that I caught in my last listen. It was, he's talking about, hey, I want to be the mayor. And, like, after he says that, you can hear, like, the spooky, like, oh! Like, that's almost like the mayor coming up. He's like, oh, no, you don't want to be the mayor. It's scary. But overall, like, for me, I love this track here. It's definitely like an interesting listen, and it could be a pure vibe thing, but the more you listen in and sink your teeth into it, the better off it is.
Yeah, like, again, I think, to me, again, I'm sort of compared, like, this being the nightmare of it. It almost feels like if you're listening to this album up to this point, and you've listened to Trouble Every Day, like, this is sort of like almost like you're trying to walk away from it, or just like it feels like you're trying to, or like, let me try that again. It feels like someone who's trying to like escape all of this, maybe like trying to go outside and get some fresh air, realizing that the air is not so fresh because they're just being surrounded by freaks and hippies, which I think, again, Frank Zappa does a really good job of describing that in sort of like this nightmare form. And again, if you're a person who's like into like hippie stuff or, blissing out or whatever it is, that's on you. That's your prerogative. But I feel like for Frank, he sees them as the enemy of, middle class suburbia where everything's neat and nice and fine. Trying to, as Peter Gabriel would say, lead a normal life. Which, come to think of it, a lot of parallels to that track to this one, where you sort of have like everything's fine, it's not fine. So yeah, no, this track rules just for being that groundbreaking. And fun fact, it actually, on the original vinyl pressings of this album, the next track, It Can't Happen Here, was the second part, or the third movement, as it were, of Help I'm a Rock. But I think on subsequent releases, it was its own standalone track. So, talking about It Can't Happen Here.
So, like we alluded to, this song continues on the more abstract and experimental side, and it's very entertaining. Given context here, the song is about the freak scene rising in America and how the straight-laced scene viewed them as a bad influence and be like, oh hey, it can't happen here. This is America. Apple pie and white picket fences and 2.5 children. And what happened to that 0.5 child?
Where the hell did that come from?
My brain. Apparently, I'm on one today.
2.5 children. Oh, that's fantastic.
But yeah, overall though, again, another crazy experimental song. I did dig the call-outs of various locations. You get Minnesota, you get Kansas, and you get very DC, which is very, I would say almost different flavors of traditional America. You get your Minnesota where you are in Minnesota and you're cold, and then you get your Kansas people who are hey, I'm in Kansas, and it's very Kansas.
Welcome to Minnesota, it's very cold. Welcome to Kansas, it's very Kansas. The floor is made out of floor.
And DC, which is the epicenter of America with politics and everything like that. And then after that, after DC's mentioned, the repetition of how Frank plays on the phrase AC/DC, that's fantastic. I did dig that a lot. And then the ending, where Frank is letting Susie know that they are interested in her development, and she says, "Forget it."
Right.
I did appreciate that one a good bit, but yeah, great track.
I agree, and part of what makes this track so good is the fact that, again, even though this very much is an a cappella track, which, I wouldn't even call it an a cappella track, it walks the tightrope between spoken word and a cappella, and just doesn't really care where it lands. It's walking just above this, volcano filled with lava. It's just all right, sure, whatever. And just the way that this track continues to sort of be musical in certain situations where, the vocals on where it's can't happen here, it can't happen here. Again, feels very a cappella-y. Frank singing is actually really good on this track. But just the funny moments where, again, you mentioned Minnesota and you hear the one vocalist go, it's what the hell are they doing? And why do I like it so much? But again, you nailed everything about this track. It's fun. It's in your face. It's pretty much attacking suburbia one more time and saying, listen, here is, you think it wouldn't happen here. It's happening here and it's happening right now. And we may or may not be part of this. So, yeah, I dig this track a lot, too.
Man, I just love the many different like shades of Zappa in this album here.
Right. Like to me, it almost feels like, and I'll probably explain a little bit more at the end of when we do the full review, but it definitely feels like he's throwing like everything he can at the wall just to like make this album like, maybe it's his first and his last. You never know, because life does funny things, but he's just putting it all out there, and that includes the final track on this album, the sidelong, The Return of the Son of Monster Magnet. And again, if you thought Help 'Em a Rock was weird, here we go. Because this track, 12 minutes in length, and basically for the first 7 or 8 minutes, is just an avant-garde sound collage over a drum solo by Jimmy Carl Black. But once again, it is that drum solo that puts things in place. Again, it has the feel of rock. It has the feel of, oh, this has a beat, you could dance to it, but there's really nothing else that's there. It starts with this sort of spoken interlude between Frank Zappa and Susie Cream Cheese, hence the name. Basically saying, Susie Cream Cheese, babe, what's gotten into you? And then just descends into these, like, manic growls of, Rah! And then, again, for the next 7 minutes, it's drums and noise, which, again, nobody was doing this in 1966. Like, everyone, like, thinks about Revolution 9 by the Beatles as, like, this sort of, like, weird kick in the door for, like, weird sound collages. Honey. Right here. This is the first one. This is the first one where Frank was like, I'm going to put this on a record, and let's see if them try to stop me. And they didn't. I really don't have much else to say. Again, the ending after the drums where it's mostly vocals. Actually, it's all vocals. Frank saying, America's wonderful. America's wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. It really makes it. And then just a bunch of random noises and people saying cream cheese for the last 3 minutes-ish of the song, including the last minute and a half where it's sped up to double time for good measure. It's so weird and so full of chaos, I can't moniker it as like a bottom track whatsoever. It's weird, but I respect it for its weirdness.
I do too, man. What was I gonna say? So I love how Frank sequenced the album with having these 3 tracks as the last 3. Because you think about what came beforehand, like you get some weird moments and where Who Are the Brain Police and songs here or there. But for the most part, what we compared like a lot of these song textures to, Beatles-esque, like, straightforward pop. You get the doo-wop stuff that has, fun moments. And it's almost like Frank did a bait and switch. He's just like, oh, hey, yeah, I'm going to introduce the album with this here. And, if someone just keeps it on, leaves it on the turntable, oh, wait, what's going on? Is my stereo being possessed by Satan right now? But, yeah. I'm not going to really touch on too much more on this track because you did an excellent job talking about it.
Thank you.
But absolute highlight for me whenever the track kicks off with oh hey, Frank being asking Susie Cream Cheese what's gotten into her, and then Susie's just like, well, let me tear open my soul in abstract right in front of you. That's pretty much it. And, the way that Zappa plays with the word cream cheese at the end, it's great, like you mentioned. Overall, though, fantastic song. I really did appreciate the last 3 tracks on this album. It really just shows, where experimental rock really took off, and, I'm here for it.
I'm here for it too. Again, this is stuff that was so revolutionary for its time, and even today sounds very revolutionary. What artist, aside from Milk Banana, could you legitimately see doing stuff like this?
But you know what?
What?
We did it.
We did do it. Some way, somehow, we did it.
We freaked out.
Pretty much. Pretty much. No, there's no real question about it. It was a freak out type of experience. So I'm going to let you go first on this one.
So, for me, this is my first exposure to the mothers of Invention, first exposure to Frank Zappa, and for the first couple of tracks, outside some of the trippy stuff, it kind of reminded me of the satire approach of the Turtles, brought to the table, but thanks to tracks like Trouble Every Day and the last three tracks, and there was enough moments within the rest of the album that really made this album stand out from that Turtles album that we covered. Slash, if you're like, what are Turtles? Go check out our back catalog. It's a good record, good episode. Getting back to this review here, for me, some of the songs kind of come across as a basics, 70s music kind of stuff. Some songs have funny lyrics, and just some songs are crazy as shit. What an album, man! And I am gonna bump up my score because just how well this review went and how much I'm vibing right now. I was gonna give it an 8 out of 10. I'm gonna bump it up to a 9 out of 10.
You're giving it a 9 out of 10.
Yeah, it's an amazing album.
It really is an amazing album. Again, just from Jump Street, he went after suburbia, he went after the status quo, and kept punching it in the face over and over and over again. Whether it's the satirical doo-wop on Go Cry on Somebody Else's Shoulder, or stuff like Hungry Freak's Daddy, or the end to I Ain't Got No Heart, or the droning sound of Who Are the Brain Police, to the masterpiece of Trouble Every Day, the orchestral masterpiece of I'm Not Satisfied. Even lesser tracks to me like Wowie Zowie or Any Way the Wind Blows fit in nicely. And the way the album ends with this just crazy avant-garde sound collage just, again, defied everything we knew about record making or rock music up to that point. For me, this is an easy 10 out of 10.
We have another 10 out of 10, ladies and gentlemen.
First 10 in a while. We haven't had one in, I can't even remember the last 10 either of us had. I'll have to check the database. But no, listening back to this for the first time in a while on a walk some time ago, I was just like, holy hell, this album did some things. I mean, not just from the objective standpoint, this is only the second ever double album released in rock history by a week. Because Dylan had done it first with Blonde on Blonde. And as great as that album is, this album did stuff that nobody had ever done. And it's kind of a shame, honestly, that this honestly is probably one of the top, in my opinion, top albums of Zappa's career. A lot of the other stuff he didn't quite reach this level, and it sort of went a bit more of a sophomore, typical comedy, typical, cynical take type of stuff later on. But this is just, it's something else, man.
I'm very glad that you brought this to the table, man. I love this kind of shit.
Yeah, again, for this to be released, again, a year before Sgt. Pepper, which, by the way, a lot of people would say Paul McCartney actually was influenced by this album a little bit to make Sgt. Pepper. How true that is, that's all McCartney deferred to say, but I can kind of see it. This just basically told the world, you don't have to go by the typical standards. You can do whatever the hell you want.
Yeah. So, for me, I had a hard time doing the next album recommendation. So,
can't imagine why.
But you already kind of hinted at this album earlier, and it was the only album that I can really, just say, hey, I listened to this album. It's a good album. If you like this album, check out this album. And that would be the White Album by the Beatles. Has some experimental stuff, some pretty good songs there. Nothing as funny as what Frank did in this here, and nothing as anti-establishment. But it's a good album nonetheless.
I agree. I think that would be a nice if you were to say somebody, hey, listen to Freak Out by the Mothers of Invention, okay, maybe go with the White Album first. Because if you went straight with Freak Out, you might have like an aneurysm if you're expecting typical rock or pop stuff.
Yeah.
But no, the White Album is a very good comparison. Ironically enough, though, the album I'm going to recommend is sort of a critique, both visually and in some ways musically, of the Beatles, which is one of the Frank Zappa albums I've actually recommended before, which is We're Only In It For The Money from 1968. Very anti-establishment. More direct of a take on like hippie culture. Like there's some songs on there like Who Needs the Peace Corps or Absolutely Free, Lonely Little Girl. Like it's sort of I wouldn't say a sequel to this album by any means because it's a little bit more straightforward in its musicality. But as much as I would recommend some of his other 60s work like Uncle Meat or Absolutely Free, which is his next album after Freak Out, I'm not as familiar with these albums to like recommend them fully. This one I am, so We're Only In It For The Money is my next recommended album based off Freak Out.
So, ladies and gentlemen, if you've enjoyed this album here, Freak Out by the Mothers of Invention, listen to We're Only In It For The Money by Frank Zappa. It's
the Mothers of Invention.
Okay, so check out that other album by the Mothers of Invention. Or, I mean, if you want something maybe like a little less spicy, maybe if you want to go down to maybe a 2 in terms of like experimental, maybe a 4.
And I'm kind of glad you recommended the White Album for that because it does bring into context like how crazy this album is. Yeah. Like if you want something less spicy, try the White Album. I was like, what? I'm sorry.
Oh man. All right. So, Matt,
it is your turn.
It is my turn. So,
how are you going to top this one?
I can't. But I have some fun. I have some fun selections up for grabs here.
I am looking very eager to which those would be.
So I'm not going to give any context other than we're going back to the year of our Lord 2024.
Oh.
So I was talking to Jamie last night about these albums, and she came up with optical terms. And these are the terms. I'm going to have you pick between 2, okay?
Okay.
Polycarbonate or color vision deficiency?
Polycarbonate or color vision deficiency?
Yeah.
Ooh. All right, Jamie, I see you. Ironically enough. Get it? Class puns.
Yeah.
I'm going to go with, what was the second one?
Color vision deficiency.
Color vision deficiency. I'm going to go with that one.
All right. So for our next review, we are going to be talking about the new EP from the group Bon Iver called Sable.
Oh.
So Bon Iver has entered the chat.
Bon Iver has entered the chat. This is going to be an interesting one because even though I've listened to a bit of Bon Iver in the past, or maybe that's just me thinking it's Fleet Foxes, I am very curious to see how this one's going to go.
All right. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you have not listened to the new EP from Bon Iver called Sable, make sure you check it out before next week's review. It's gonna be a good time. Not gonna compare to this album whatsoever because it's going from one spice to just here's a cup of coffee.
Yeah. No, you can't compare Bon Iver to Frank Zappa. It can't happen here.